The Illuminate, the most disliked faction in the Helldivers 2 community, and we've just gotten a major order for them, and I believe we'll be killing them for a little while considering the other two faction fronts are having some issues. So today we're going to be talking about how to consistently dominate the Illuminate army, whether you're in a group of 4 or 3, a duo, or even completely solo. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to quickly talk about each individual enemy, how to best handle them, what are some of the best weapons and stratagems to use against them, and then of course we'll talk about all of them combined in an army, as we should. So first there's the Voteless, the big bulk of the army. These make up for pretty much like 80% of the Illuminate numbers, but that's where it kind of messes with some players' minds. What I mean by that is, a lot of players will just see how many Votelesses there are and they'll think, okay, I need to bring a weapon to focus on them. And I've actually quite often seen players pick up the Stalwart or use an SMG or assault rifle to try to spray down the Voteless army. But that's honestly a big mistake. There are simply too many Votelesses to handle, and if you spend time actively spraying down the Votelesses, you'll become a very easy bait for Overseers, Harvesters, or Fleshmobs to kill you while you're wasting your time. Think of Votelesses like this. They're designed to force you to reposition and waste your ammo and time. So if you just sit there trying to gun down the thousands of Votelesses you face, you will end up just wasting all of your ammo and time without making any real progression. Instead, what I would recommend is by utilizing either fire or gas to your advantage. Votelesses are really dumb. If you just throw a fire nade or a gas nade at their feet, the entire group of Voteless will just run right over it and drop dead. They also run at pretty much a straight line towards you, so use that to your advantage. By doing this, you waste 0 ammo and you handle the entire group with one single grenade or mine. So for Votelesses, try your best not to really build your loadout around them. They only exist to apply pressure on you and waste your resources. So once you understand that, I would recommend bringing grenades specifically for them. Ideally, either a gas nade or incendiary nades, and at most, one more stratagem that can double both as a Voteless clear, as well as other enemies in their armies, such as, for example, gas mines, orbital napalm barrage, eagle napalm barrage, gas strikes. All of those choices can handle both the Votelesses as well as the other enemies in the army as well. The real danger in the Illuminate army is the following two enemies we're going to be talking about: the Overseers and the Fleshmobs, especially the Overseers. The other enemies in the army are mostly just kind of designed to apply constant pressure on you, but specifically the Overseers are designed to wipe you out, and you have to be extremely careful about them. So let's go ahead and talk about them now. The Overseers are, in my opinion, the most dangerous enemy in the entire Illuminate army. Heck, I'd even go as far as to say that they're probably like in the top 5, if not top 3 most dangerous enemy in the entire game. And honestly, there's so many reasons as to why I truly believe that. They are extremely tanky, like way more tanky than they should be given the quantity of them. And they also kind of force an explosive weapon meta if you truly want an easy way to deal with them. And they come in extremely large quantities, like I said. On top of all that, they fly extremely high up, completely disregarding high ground advantage, and giving them an extremely easy shot to land, and they're, well, extremely fast and pretty goddamn accurate. Now, when you add all of that up with the fact that you're probably facing about 100 of them a game, and yeah, they're probably one of, if not the deadliest enemy in the game. Now, realizing that they are extremely dangerous enemies, I would recommend bringing a few choices in your loadout to specifically deal with them. The way I like to do it is to bring the most meta choice against Overseers for my primary weapon. My primary weapon is usually chosen specifically for the Overseers, and the two best choices in the entire game against them will be the Scorcher and the Purifier. I really don't think anyone would disagree with that after testing it out. What is also neat about the Scorcher and Purifier is that they also double as a solid choice against Fleshmobs as well, but we'll talk about that later. If you don't bring a primary choice for the Overseers, then I would recommend bringing either a secondary or a support weapon specifically built for them. A good secondary would be the Loyalist, for example, and a good support weapon would be the grenade launcher or an AMR or an HMG, etc. Now, regardless of what you bring, you must keep the Overseer's number under control. And by that I mean, focus on these units first, before any other enemy, with the exception of the Watchers. Overall though, you should really prioritize Overseers, because once their numbers reach a certain point, they'll just have the consistent high ground on you and your team, and will surely kill you guys non-stop. And Watchers will just kind of come along and put you in a reinforcement loop that will feel impossible to step out of. More on the Overseers later, but let's talk a little bit about the Fleshmobs. The Fleshmobs are, in my opinion, one of the worst designed enemy in all of Helldivers 2. They're a 6,000 health enemy purely designed to waste your resources, your time, and most importantly, apply tons and tons of pressure. Much like the Voteless in that sense, except they're extremely dangerous. In an ideal world, we would be able to deal with them like we deal with Voteless, which is by not trying to waste too much time on them. For example, the Chargers on the Terminid front, despite them having a lot of health and a lot of armor, you can kill them with a single thermite to the head. But, well, Fleshmobs you kind of can't. And they also come in far more quantity too. So much, matter of fact, that there are patrols that can come with 4 Fleshmobs in one single small group of a patrol. That's 24,000 health just sitting there in one little patrol. But yeah, like I said earlier, I'd recommend the Scorcher and Purifier, as they're also pretty amazing at dealing with Fleshmobs. But for Fleshmobs specifically, I would also recommend having a really good stratagem for them. In my opinion, the best has got to be the Orbital Napalm Barrage. It's fantastic at wiping out a whole horde of them with minimal effort. Now moving on to the Stingrays. The Stingrays are a fantastically designed enemy, unlike the Fleshmobs. They have proper counterplay, they apply a fun degree of pressure, they're not cheesy in any way, and they can be destroyed without having to bring a very specific anti-tank weapon or something of the sort. Thankfully for the Stingray, you won't be needing to bring anything specifically for them. Odds are somewhere in your loadout you'll have at least one medium armor penetration weapon that can deal with them, or at least an explosive choice. So HMG, Scorcher, Purifier, Spear, whatever. Most of the weapons in the game can actually kill these somewhat easily. And if nothing in your loadout can kill it, then let me tell you, my friend, you have a really garbage loadout equipped right now. For Stingrays, you'll just want to keep an eye out for their strikes. I wouldn't really prioritize dealing with them unless you have some time to deal with them, like there's no ground enemies around you. But they're definitely not the most immediate threat as long as you keep on moving. As for the Harvesters, these are the scariest enemies on the Illuminate front, mostly because their attack kind of one-shots you if it lands, so you'll likely be extremely worried about them as long as they're alive. The challenge with dealing with Harvesters is that oftentimes you'll need a bit of space from the ground enemies so as to make an attempt at destroying them. So as to kind of minimize that constant necessity of creating space to specifically deal with Harvesters, I like to bring something like a Strafing Run to make their shields a non-issue. Or a Spear or Recoilless Rifle to be able to one-shot them, that's also a good solution. And another great solution is to bring a Warp Pack to make creating space a lot easier. So if you bring, let's say, a heavy machine gun and a supply pack with nothing to destroy their shields other than your actual weapon, you'll have a much harder time to deal with them. Don't get me wrong, HMG and supply pack is an amazing combination. I just mean specifically handling the Harvesters is going to be a little bit harder, because you'll need to create space somehow, getting the Overseers, Fleshmobs, and Votelesses off of you, to then try to make a go at it with the HMG while hoping the Harvester is not just gonna beam you down. If you bring something to destroy their shields, or something to one-shot them, or something to easily create space, it does become quite a bit easier. But we'll talk about how we manage all that here in a second. Lastly, there's the Watchers. These are the only way Illuminate can call reinforcements, and because of that, these should be any player's utmost priority. It doesn't matter if an Overseer is like 2 feet in front of you about to beam you down. If you do not get rid of that Watcher first, you're gonna be having a really bad time. So overall, how do we handle the Illuminate in game when there's all sorts of enemies coming at you from all different angles? So against the Illuminate, a mix between movement and positioning is gonna be key. Against the automatons, usually positioning is the most important to hide from shots. And against the Terminids, movement is most important to constantly stay out of enemies' melee range. But against the Illuminate, you're actually going to need both, which is also why they're so challenging. You You want to never really let the Votelesses and Fleshmobs catch up to you and apply too much pressure, but you also want to use the buildings and cover to your advantage to avoid Stingrays, Harvesters, and Overseer damage. In the priority scale, like we said a few seconds ago, the Watchers are going to be your biggest priority. It doesn't matter how a fight is going, you have got to get rid of these Watchers first. If they call a reinforcement and you get stuck in a bad fight and they manage to call in a second reinforcement, then you're kind of screwed. You're going to get stuck in a reinforcement loop where it will likely lead to a lost game. On the Votelesses, you're going to want to manage their numbers through equipment or mine stratagems. I would always recommend gas nades and mines instead of fire ones to not only guarantee the kills, but they also crowd control the Votelesses while they're at it. Try to keep your other resources such as ammo saved up for the other enemies and use these to thin out their numbers. For the Fleshmobs, I'd recommend avoiding them for as long as you can. Focus on the other enemies that are of bigger priorities and handle the Fleshmobs later. If you have to choose between trying to kill an Overseer or trying to kill a Fleshmob, always go for the Overseer first, especially if they're the flying ones. Now, if you're on a stationary objective where you kind of have to stand still, this is kind of a different conversation, but overall, avoid them for as long as you can. And as they kind of stack up a little bit in numbers, you can use a good AoE stratagem choice to wipe out the groups as quickly as possible. Now, Stingrays are going to show up from time to time mid-fight, and much like the Fleshmobs, I would avoid dealing with them. The only time I'd recommend actually taking your time to shoot them down is when you have no more immediate ground threat and you can actually afford to shoot these out of the sky. The biggest threat, however, on the Illuminate front is going to be the Overseers. These should be dealt on sight. Like I said earlier, especially the flying ones are extremely fast. Oftentimes, they won't even let you run away from them, so deal with them on sight so their numbers doesn't stack up too high. A really good primary choice here, combined with maybe sentries, are fantastic ways to kill them as soon as possible. As for the Harvesters, like I said earlier, it's rather difficult to create space to deal with them unless you built specifically for it. And it's important to keep that in mind when building your loadouts. It all depends on what you brought, right? Some loadouts will need very little time to deal with the Harvesters, like the recoilless rifle, where others are going to need a ton of time, like the laser cannon. It varies a lot, so you're going to have to feel it out depending on what you brought, but I recommend bringing something that gets rid of their shield and doubles as a horde clearer, like the strafing run or cluster bomb, and have a quick Harvester killing support weapon so as to kind of minimize the necessary time invested in each Harvester. So that's kind of how you juggle the Illuminate army as you're moving through the fights. Now, it's very difficult for me to make this video because it's very difficult to tell you guys exactly what to do because it really just kind of depends on what you're facing. How many Fleshmobs, how many Harvesters, how many Overseers, etc. And really, it really depends on what loadout you have on as well. But I hope that this video can be of some help to some players. So with that said, thank you guys very much for watching, man. And I'll be catching you guys on the next one. Peace.